I think it's 9:30. Hope you can all hear us. Welcome to the Dorothy Heathcote Now conference. I know we have people from over the world tuning in at the moment, and welcome to you all. This conference will be online today, and then we have 2 days in person at Birmingham City University. Today we're coming to you from Newman University, and Dorothy Heathcote had a long association with Newman University. With the Mantle Network, we organised a number of events, teacher training events, which she came to here. And there are some films of that online. So I'm David Allen. I'm from Midland Actors Theatre. We're one of the organisers of this conference. I had the honour and good fortune to know Dorothy and to work with her. And we are lead partners in 2 Erasmus Plus projects at the moment, connected with Dorothy's work. One of them about Rolling Roll, one of them about the commission model. And we did a previous Erasmus Plus project, again with partners across Europe, looking at Mantle of the Expert. So it happens to be 10 years to the day that Dorothy died. So I'm sure for some of us who knew her, this will be an emotional day. Just a note to say that if you have any technical issues, please contact admin@bertsassociates.net, B-E-R-T-Z. That's admin@bertsassociates.net. I made a bit of a mess on a couple of emails and got the email address wrong. That's the email if you have any technical issues, but hopefully everything will be smooth. So I think for many of us who knew and worked with Dorothy, she remains a presence and not just an influence. I'm sitting here, you can see, with Cecily O'Neill, who worked with Dorothy, as I'm sure you know, over many years, and edited the collected works, well, the collected writings, rather, not the collected works. The collected works should come later, perhaps. We should start on that, perhaps. That's quite a big job. So, I think the important thing about Dorothy's work is that if you follow through what she says, it will change you as a teacher. And in fact, if you follow it through logically, her work would not just change drama teaching, but it would change schooling and education itself. And that, I think, is what she's about. It's a transformation in the way we think about learning and about schooling. And in the 1980s, I was a PGCE student doing David Davis's course, which introduced me to Dorothy's work. And David Hornbrook at that time was challenging the dominance of Dorothy and Gavin Bolton in drama teaching. And he advocated instead a curriculum for drama as a form of theatre studies, teaching about playwrights, genres, and so on. Teaching theatre, teaching performance skills. And you would have to say that in the long term, it seems as if David Hornbrook has won, because that is what a lot of drama teaching in schools is, in England anyway, today. In the 1960s and 70s, Brian Way was offering a form of watered down theatre skills and exercise-based work. And it seems to me, when I look at drama teaching, that in some ways we've gone backwards to that kind of model. And you'd have to say that in the pressured world that teachers work in now, it's easier for them to be able to pull down a scheme of work about medieval theatre or commedia dell'arte with lots of activities, clear teaching goals, clear curriculum. And not so easy in the current situation, maybe, to strive for the kind of work that Dorothy was talking about. She always made a distinction between the teacher artist and the teacher technician. And I think our education in England now, anyway, calls more for the teacher technician who will deliver the curriculum. If you follow Dorothy's work, then I think it's a case of it's something that you keep learning about. You never stop. You keep learning from her as a teacher. I know I feel that I do. It's doing the Facebook page, the commission model of teaching, with daily posts about Dorothy's work. I feel like I'm still being mentored by her. I'm still learning from her. And so it's not something that you could learn about in a one-day training course, for example. And I don't know, but it may seem somewhat complex or off-putting to some teachers, because if you look at the Mantle Network webpage, where we have lots of materials about Dorothy, then you have some of the building blocks that she talks about for drama work. And it might seem quite a lot to take on board and quite complex. And I think it is, because it's things that I keep struggling with. And I've been looking at and working with Dorothy's ideas for about 40 years, I think. So I'm still working at it. And as I say, I still feel like I'm learning. And indeed, Dorothy herself kept working at them. She always saying she was learning about these things, not that she was teaching them so much, but she was learning about them herself. And this is, I think, is the difference, I would say, with the teacher artist as opposed to the teacher technician. So when I set up the idea of this conference, I called it Dorothy Heathcote Now, because to me, it shouldn't be a in memoriam event. The key thing for me is that we should see her work as a living legacy, not part of history, but something that, not something that was important for a time and has now been surpassed. As I say, I think in some ways we've gone backwards in drama teaching. Rather, I see it as we need her work now. We need to follow her dream of what education should be and fight not only for good drama, but for good education and good learning, and for the transformation of our schools and schooling system. As I said in a recent podcast for the Applied Theatre podcast, boy, do we need her now. So later on, you'll be hearing today about the Dorothy Heathcote Archive. And Dorothy always wanted her archive to be a resource that would be used by not only teachers, but practitioners and people in different spheres of the health service or charities, the kind of groups that she worked with. And this is what we will be doing at this conference. One of the main strands will be looking at some of those resources from the archive. And there will be, in the conference over the weekend, there will be archive working groups. And each group will look at a particular project that Dorothy did and some of the resources from the archive, and looking at what was she doing, what strategies was she using, how might we use them now in the classroom, which I think was always her idea. And in the archive, there are not just lesson plans or notes or theses or articles, but also maps, drawings, materials that she produced, resources she produced to use in some of these projects. So I don't see this really as an academic conference. What we have is well, in 1996, Dorothy did a conference at Birmingham City University, or University of Central England as it was then, and she called it an interactive research conference. And that's how I see this conference. We are gathered together to do research about Dorothy's work on an interactive basis. So those working groups, the archive working groups, will use those materials as, I would call it, unfinished materials, open materials to be examined, interpreted, interrogated, made sense of. And I think that we can learn from these resources, maybe even more than from a textbook about Dorothy's work. And as I say, it fulfills what I think was her aim, which is we should make sense of these materials and use them for ourselves, not copy what she was doing. And those materials that the groups work on over this weekend will be posted on the Mantle Network website to provide guidance, inspiration to other teachers. Now, I'm here with some students today from Newman University, drama students, And I started working with them last week, in fact. They're doing a module on theatre in education. And one of the things we did last week was we looked at the Hexam Hospital Garden Commission, which was a commission model project that Dorothy did at the Queen Elizabeth High School in Hexam. So commission model may be one of the lesser known aspects of Dorothy's work, where in Mantle of the Expert, you have a fictitious team and a fictitious client. In the commission model, you have an actual, real client in the community. And that changes many things, I think, about the whole way you work on the project. And in the case of the Hexam Hospital Garden Commission, it was a hospital that commissioned a group of young people to come up with ideas for the design of a new hospital garden. And one of the things they did, one of the tasks that Dorothy did with the young people, to explore the idea of what a garden is. They looked at different garden genres, such as a Japanese garden or a Zen garden. And the teaching staff, or as Dorothy called them, the senior commissioners, wrote some texts, created garden voices. And we looked at these texts. And in the original project, these texts were read out by these senior commissioners. And the young people in the space sat and listened to these garden voices and then made notes of their own thoughts and impressions. And last week, with the students here from Newman, we attempted to recreate this task. Just as the archive working groups over this weekend will be looking at materials and attempting to work out what was going on, what Dorothy was doing, recreate them to some extent. So we made a short film, and we're going to show you an extract from it now. It's a bit long, so we won't show you all of it. And the students here have not yet seen it, as we only made it last week. So I don't know if you might hear them giggling in the background when they spot themselves, I don't know. So Sam, Iris, if we could cue the film, the Garden Voices film, and show about 4 minutes of it.
I used to feel awkward, unworthy even, when people visited me. It's awkward, you know, when you don't know what people want from you. As time passed, however, I began to get a feel for my role. The people who visit me are not unhappy. I am not a place to grieve. I provide support and encouragement. I help people to regain perspective, to regain control over their lives. People need my silence. They need my tranquility. People really enjoy the time they spend with me. My colours paint the gaps they feel they have with bright shades. The wildlife that lives alongside me gives people energy and optimism. I help because I care, and most of all, because I remember.
I am at peace. I sense round stones and pebbles on my surface, and cool, fresh, life-giving water washes over them. The liquid splashing over the pebbles sounds like laughter. There are chuckles in the air. They bring back memories of happy times I have spent in the sun, hearing friends at play. There is something reassuring about my present, as though, whatever may happen, the cycle of water is constant, and, come what may, will always be there.
I am a garden of shape, form and shadow, an invitation to the winds and airs, a changing symphony of sounds on blustery days, and at calmer times give sanctuary to smaller flying life. I am formed by nature and the surgeon's knife, circumspectly taking note of sap and flow and heart of wood. Those who visit me can find at need shadow and substance and openness in sunlight. My shapes can offer shade and shelter to lean into and look outward from. They invite close attention to shape of leaf and twig and seasonal cobweb, and visions of caves and labyrinths within the outer forms. Those who visit me may feel the companionship of standing forms, or use my architectural presence to shelter pain or tears from prying eyes. But these same shapes can invite the games of children, and sudden laughter heard to invite smiles and recollections of more and troubled times. Whatever the season in my garden, you will find strong shapes and mainly greens of many hues. Yet seasonally, I may clothe my shapes in whitening frost and cap and cape of snow. Then may I shine in moonlight and give winter light.
Inspiration is from a blue and white willow plate. Water is a definite feature, with a bridge and fence of bamboo, narrow paths leading to the undergrowth. Willow trees rustling in the wind, birds nesting in the branches, then flying high. Wind chimes tinkling in the slight breeze, sound of water running over stones, gurgling and splashing, and fish jumping. Bright light filtering through the leaves of trees, and reflecting off the water ripples, refracting through glass wind chimes, creating rainbows over the stream. The smell of jasmine fills the air, delicate pink flowers fill the borders, Japanese lanterns hang beneath an archway. Here is a place of peace and tranquility.
I am the voice of the bog garden. You reach me by stepping through gnarled wild tone trees, and there I am. There are more showy gardens than I, more flamboyant. I have modest foliage, soft mosses and taller ferns. My scents and odours are various, born of nature's intended living forms. I represent the mysterious being of the garden world. I have hidden ponds disguised at edge by reeds, and grasses and taller, wilder flowers. Frogs and toads are safe in my world and sing their songs freely there. It is said that gardens such as me have given rise to ancient tales of princesses lying in the rich mosses, hoping, near my dark and whirly shaded world, to find a prince long magicked into toad, waiting to be freed of magic's evil spell by a kiss.
Serenity, a strange word, an alien word for many, but that is what I am. Serenity, a canopy of carefully maintained flora that keeps the sun at bay even in the harshest of summers, coming to life with wails of shimmering leaves only in the most brutal of storms. Sometimes, on the warmest nights when the moon is full, I wonder if my leaves will ever be graced by the gentle words of a softly spoken haiku that generations before used to compose from my body. Today, though, a geisha plucks delicately at the tight strings of a koto, her fingers dancing across the chords like a ballerina at her first recital. Her audience of ancient calves, some nearly as old as I am, leap through a small pond, almost like an audience giving their cheers. Me and my children enjoy the performance. In a small shed just off to my one side, a pair of small bonsai trees sit in their pots, their roots nourished by the soil within, allowing their branches to grow and weave before bursting into bushels of meticulously trimmed squares. And tucked between the foliage, just out of sight, a bamboo deer scarer rhythmically clicks and clatters as streams of running water drip, drip down the rocks. Yes, this is Serenity. This is me.
Show you the rest next time, and I'll try and persuade the young people here that we can put it on the website. Thank you very much for your work on that. So to explain the schedule for today, shortly we will be talking to Cecily O'Neill. The young people here, the drama students, have prepared some questions for her. They are themselves going to be doing some process drama in schools, so they're looking for advice and information from Cecily and who else to ask. And one of the things about this conference that I was keen to emphasize from the start was that we're going to try and look at different aspects of her work. She wrote an article once, 4 Contexts in Active Learning, where she outlined 4 different ways of working. And it seems to me that it's important that we look at her whole legacy, all aspects of it, because her work in one kind of method informs the work of another method, I think. And there's not sort of clear distinctions between them at all. And that's the framework of our conference, that we are looking at, and we've brought in people with experience in different ways, different aspects of Dorothy's work and Dorothy's legacy. And so we'll begin with Cecily, as I say. Unfortunately, there's going to be quite a lot of me today, so I apologize about that in advance. At 11 o'clock, we have a short break, and then there will be Pieces of Dorothy, International Links, because in 1993, there was a film made, Pieces of Dorothy, which was based around the launch of the Dorothy Heathcote archive. And somebody in that film said, there should be pieces of Dorothy scattered all around the world. And I think there are pieces of Dorothy scattered around the world. Her influence can be seen internationally in different countries. And we have speakers in that panel. We have Akiko Kato, who worked closely with Dorothy. We have Vaishali Chakrabarti from India, and we have Zeki Ozan from Turkey, who also worked with Dorothy. Vaishali is an example of somebody who didn't know Dorothy personally, but is inspired by her work and developing that and carrying it on with her organization, The Joy of Drama. And then after lunch, we have I'm back, I'm afraid, and we have a session about Rolling Roll, where I'll be talking to Claire Armstrong Mills, who developed Rolling Roll in her own school, worked closely with Dorothy, and appeared on 16 videos with Dorothy talking about Rolling Roll. So she is really the sort of leading expert on Rolling Roll. And I'm pleased to say that she has a contract for a book on Rolling Roll, which should be appearing next year. Then we have a session with Bea Varley and Eleni Kanira, who will be talking about, well, the title is From Classroom to Boardroom, the Alchemical Model of Leadership. And this is a very unique project, I think. Bea will be talking with Eleni about a project that Dorothy planned with Bea. But Dorothy herself was not able to take part, And it may well have been the very last Mantle project that Dorothy had a part in before her death. And then 3:15, 4:15, we have a panel looking at the Dorothy Heathcote archive, how it was set up, what's there, how it can be used in future, because we are looking at trying to develop it. And the panel consists of Sandra Heston, Tony Jackson, the chair is Agatha Handley, and I'm on that as well. And then we have, after a short break, 4:30 to 5:30, we have Brian Edmiston and Yona Towler Evans, and they're looking at, they call it Humanizing Education with Dramatic Inquiry, a dialogue with Dorothy Heathcote's radical and transformative pedagogy. And I think that phrase, humanizing education, really is what Dorothy was about. It's about putting the human in education, because a lot of education, I think Dorothy would use the phrase, she would call it antiseptic. And she was always looking for the septic, sort of things that have had a human touch, human hands on them. I think it's fair to say that. I remember when she came to Birmingham to do an event, and we did this event at Aston Conference Centre, and we put her in a hotel room in the conference centre. And of course, this was a very modern building, and I think Dorothy hated it, really. I'm afraid she felt it was too antiseptic, and we should have found something that had got human touch to it. So, as I say, welcome again. Oh, one thing I should just add is that the National Association for the Teachers of Drama, NATD, have produced a special issue of their journal, the Journal for Drama in Education, which is connected to this conference. And they have done a great job of actually looking at these different aspects of Dorothy's work. They've taken on board exactly what I said the conference is about, which is about all aspects of her legacy. So I recommend that. Somebody who will be nameless, when I was planning this conference, the first thing they said to me was, will there be a goodie bag for delegates? And I thought, over my dead body. I hate it when you're given these little bags. And I thought, no, that's having a journal like that is, I think, a much better thing to be given the delegates when they arrive. So enough from me, and may I introduce and welcome Cecily O'Neill, who is, well, Kate Katafiash, who is one of the lecturers here, she said, well, some of these people we've got coming in today, they are rock stars of drama in education. And who is more of a rock star than Cecily O'Neill? Who is, I would say, well, she worked with Dorothy over many years. She edited the collected writings. She, of course, is known very much as a practitioner in her own right for developing process drama and the notion of the pretext. And I have to say, I think she's one of the nicest people I've ever met. So Cecily has agreed to answer some of the students' questions. The students came up with a list of questions, which was very long, and we could have been here all day, very productively, I'm sure. So we could have made the whole day, I think, about Cecily. But Cecily chose certain questions that I will put to her, and the students will also be available, have the opportunity to ask some questions. So our first question.
Well, before we go to the questions, may I just hear your names? I know some names already from what I've seen. Abigail Habib, I think, is it? And Ellie? Abby. Okay, but I'd love to hear all of your names and affiliation, because we also have some outliers over here from elsewhere. Okay. Would you begin?
My name's Ilana Taylor. I'm a Newman drama student.
Okay. Yep.
I'm Kate Katafiash. I'm a program leader for drama this year.
First year.
Okay.
My name's Ellie. I'm a math major. I'm Ellie and I'm an ex-student from Newman. I'm Shannon. I'm a third year drama student. I'm Molly. I'm a second year drama student. I'm Courtney. I'm a third year drama student. I'm Gemma and I'm a third year drama student. I'm a third year. I'm Rosie. I'm first year.
Okay.
I'm Jasper. I'm third year. And I'm Abby, first year.
I'm Eva and I teach drama at Stockholm University.
Say again.
Sorry.
Just a little louder.
Eva is my name.
Yes.
Yeah, I teach at Stockholm University.
Stockholm.
Yeah.
I'm Stig, teaching in drama. I'm retired. Western Norway University of Applied Sciences.
Yeah, and I'm Katrina Hexam, a Stig's colleague, and I teach at Western Norway University of Applied Sciences. So bachelor, master, and also teacher students.
Lovely to see some old friends.
You also have Harrison at the back.
Oh, sorry, Harrison. Yeah.
I should just say Jaspreet here is the person who made the film that we just watched. So
well done. Okay, well, it's just lovely to know who's in the room, and it's lovely to be here. So, that's the question.
What did you learn from Dorothy?
Well, that's going to take an hour or so more. I was thinking about that. The first time I heard her speak, she said, drama is a shared learning experience. And I took my pencil and wrote it down. I had no clue what she meant at that time, and it's taken me a long time to learn it. But that's at the heart of her work, I think, that she is not, as Jerome Bruner said, she's not a transmission agent. She's a human event. And Dorothy was, for anybody who worked with her, she was a big event. And the other thing I learned, of course, the first thing probably from seeing videos was her working in role, teacher in role. I thought, fantastic. This I can do. It will give me all the power in the world. And so the roles I took on were commandant of the prison camp, or, whatever it was, the king, or whatever gave me the greatest power, that was the role I took. And the kids got tired of it. In some cases, they sent me out of the room and took over. It's very, very hard. I remember standing in the corridor in a South London school and trying, what am I going to say if the deputy head comes along? And anyway, I realized that was probably not the way to go. So gradually, I learned what teacher in role could and couldn't do. Then the other thing that struck me very much initially about her work was the way she operated perspectives on an event. And I think that's her list of frames are really different perspectives if you look at it like that. And I saw her do something wonderful at a conference, which wasn't a very happy occasion for, there were a lot of the Hornbrook people there. And she did, she actually did a session, practical session, in a very, we were a sort of lecture theatre with a bank of onlookers. And it's not a spectator sport drama, you know, it's if you're doing something working the way Dorothy is. So they were pilgrims on the way to the Middle East. She did all sorts of things, and the students were good and responsive. At one point, she sort of stopped the interactions and she said, imagine that there is a bird flying above the boat on which they're traveling. What would the bird see? And suddenly a perspective that was so unexpected. I suddenly thought, gosh, there's, something very powerful going on here. That ability to step outside of the action and see it from such an unexpected angle. So I think every time I look at what you're doing on Facebook, I think, oh, of course, why didn't I hang on to that every moment of my teaching life? Because those are such powerful, small, but absolutely key parts of her practice. So I think it's interesting looking at what I've learned from her, but also there was an associated question to do with what other practitioners have I been influenced by. And of course, I never did do Dorothy's course. Brian Edmiston was a student of hers, but I was a student of Gavin Bolton. And I let him know that I was coming to the conference, and he sends his love to anybody who remembers him and knows him. So I'll tell him that you are here. But if you don't know his writing, check it out, because he is a theoretician in a way that Dorothy isn't. You know, he's able to look at the structure of things. And I think when I did my MA with him, that kind of, I began to see how you could put a series of episodes together, or a series of activities or strategies, or whatever conventions, whatever you want to call them, to produce an extended piece of work that would have some intensity and some aesthetic quality, luckily, and also some learning. So we did visit Dorothy's course, and we did get a chance to see her working, and that was also very useful. I remember her working with some children, and they were on, I think they were on a pirate ship or something, and suddenly the captain was in the cabin and wouldn't come out for some reason. He was locked in his cabin. If any of you are watching the Terror on television, and one or two of those recent things, Dark Water, is it? The other one, where people are locked up in Arctic ships, caught in the ice. Anyway, the captain's in his cabin, and we're all the children were watching. I'm going to get him out. And suddenly, a little boy said, "I see sharks." And you know, and she doesn't say, "Shut up about the sharks, I'm watching." She says, "You keep an eye on the sharks, and we'll watch the door of the cabin." You know, so, and he was only trying to help, poor lad, you know, adding a bit of, you know, been standing around watching this door for a minute, you know, let's get on. And that is a great skill of hers, never to say no, to accept, use, honor in a way what a child will offer, even things that are designed to be obnoxious, you know, and designed to upset her. I just sent off an article to National Drama. I may have missed the deadline, but about a sequence she did in New York, which went badly wrong. And I did speak about it at a conference in 2013, I think, where a group of boys, after a whole week of working with graduate students and students, at the very last moment, there was a lovely ceremony celebrating everything they'd done. And suddenly the boy said, "Bang, there's a bomb," and blew the whole thing up. And she didn't falter. That was a week's work to most teachers, ruined. She said, "Everything we do in this room is happening in reality somewhere in the world." And she said, "I just heard somebody on the radio saying, 'I will kill for Allah,' and this sort of thing, you know." So, but she gave it enormous significance, rather than, you know, I don't know what I would have done. But that was her ability to accept what was given and make it matter. And she was remarkable in that way. It'd be difficult for, certainly I would find that difficult to do after investing in a week's work that seems now to have been ruined. So she was an astonishing teacher. But and an astonishing thinker. She had a speed of response. She was also very good at reading the room. So she knew those boys were up to something. And her journal is in the archives, I hope. Or has Marianne still got it?
I will have to check that. You mean about this summer?
Yeah.
We'll definitely check, because
Yeah.
I know she talked to me about it as well.
Yes,
So
yeah,
it's
it
something
should
that,
be. And if not, I've got a photocopy.
oh wow.
But certainly I learned a huge amount from Gavin. And there's another teacher I ought to mention, a Canadian, David Booth, whom I first encountered on Gavin's course. An absolutely outstanding teacher with his own way of using teacher in role. And the other great teacher whom I would advise you to contact immediately and read all of his work is Shakespeare. I think absolutely everything you need to know about teaching process drama or finding a pretext, you will find in Shakespeare. He does everything. He knows it all. Just look at how he does things that Dorothy does. And of course, she knew theatre inside out. Don't find the exact moment. Find a way of making it something present that carries the burden of the past and foreshadows the future. And that's what theatre is, and that's what drama is, if you can make it work. And you're a drama student, so you will have a big background in all these folks here. I'm just looking at UNESCO and the absurdist writers, and I remember actually Dorothy did do a session for Gavin's students, and she sat on a chair swinging her legs, and we sat on the floor. And she said, oh, just checking in with you, how are you all managing now without any feet? Isn't it wonderful? So we then entered into a completely absurd discussion about how tremendously our lives had been improved by the removal of our feet. So we need never have to shop for shoes again. A really big plus. And I know it sounds silly, but and she didn't keep it up for very long. But she signed, I'm here with my feet, swinging them nicely, and you're sitting on the floor. I think she knew that absurdity is a good thing. You don't have to be deadly serious all the time. It doesn't have to be, doom and gloom. That it's possible to do something that is reasonably lighthearted and that actually still carries a message. Or you can begin lightly and ascend to the depths very rapidly. So certainly Shakespeare. To go back to what you said about teacher technician and teacher artist, what you were doing on the screen just now, and I'm sure all the offerings we didn't have time to hear were just as powerful. Somebody who includes garden voices in their work is an artist, it seems to me. Would a technician think, no, let's see what will happen next. Oh yes, we'll hear the garden. No, that is, that is so not transmission teaching. That is being an artist, being a creator, being a maker with the others, so that it is indeed a shared learning experience. So does anybody want to come back on any of that? Would that be useful? Are you, David?
Well, I think what you're saying, absolutely. I know she was, that experience in New York with the bomb incident, I know she was devastated by that, but it is an example of, she did always want to remind young people that doing a drama, this point about, this is happening somewhere in the world now. So it's not just a nice drama that we're doing. It has this resonance and this significance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And one of the things I think she was doing, because people looked at her work and they thought, well, it's so sort of, well, Dorothy can do that, but I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I think her whole life, she was breaking it down for teachers to be able to do it.
Exactly, exactly. I think she does say somewhere, just, you know, if you want to try it out, begin at, you know, 10 minutes before the bell, give it a try. And then, you know, if it doesn't work, you can, you can forget about it, or try again with 15 minutes to go. I mean, her understanding of schools, of children, of how to get the best out of people was just, I think, absolutely extraordinary. So, any other questions, comments?
Well, maybe we can move on to this question of what is process drama?
Well, it's very nearly drama in education, but I think trying to identify it, I would think it's what one would be trying to aim for is a sustained dramatic encounter. So not a skit like they're so fond of in America, and or an improv, or you know, or a sequence of activities, you know, as you were saying earlier, but something that begins and develops and carries through and is structured, or can be structured, according to the rules of theatre, is what I would try to do. I think it's the idea, again, one doesn't have to begin with a very intense or deep starting point. Think of how Shakespeare does it. We don't meet his great heroes immediately. Who do we meet in Hamlet? A couple of soldiers on the battlements saying, God, it's cold. You know, they begin. We don't meet Hamlet till about the third scene. In Macbeth, who do we meet? The witches. And we meet him later when loads of other stuff has gone. And so whatever you begin with, it's like you're opening that door to that room, that other room that Dorothy talks about. And in there, you then have the opportunity to develop not roles so much, but like Dorothy, attitudes, perspectives. So, and then, so you're seeking a kind of agreement. Dorothy would often do that quite explicitly, wouldn't she? Or she would begin with the map, or you know, a piece of research, all the materials that you'll be looking at. Sometimes I do that, but sometimes the pretext is it only exists in my head. It's a starting point for me, but sometimes it isn't. So I think one of the questions that came up, which was an interesting one to me, was can drama be used to teach difficult issues that might come up in schools, like bullying or racism? And my answer is yes, and Dorothy's answer very much would be yes, and that's what her list of frames do. They're distances from within the event to very, very far away from the event. And if you want to know about distance, Stig's book, Distancing at Close Range, is available in the best bookshops.
I can give them a link for a free download.
Okay, free downloads. I like those. And though I have the book, but it's that question of how far you need to be from something to look at it. You know, if you were on stage with the actors standing in the middle of them, you get some kind of a possibility of knowing what was going on. But actually, if you're back a ways, you have to see it. It's like seeing something that this is close, that's too close. You know, out here is better, over there is better. Back in the past is better, in the future is better. All of those will give you enough distance on an event to make it possible to deal with it. Because often that sort of material will raise issues which you want them to be raised, but you want to have a framework within which you can address them. Not to teach about them or say, oh, bullying is very bad, David. Don't want to see any more of that in this class. I remember seeing lots of lessons about bullying, which merely showed, you know, tableaus of people being bullied. Kids know that. You don't need to do that. You don't need to teach them how to do bullying, actually, or indeed racism, unfortunately. But you need to look at it and give them a position from which they can address those issues. I did a drama once because I've been asked to tackle bullying. And so the children became the staff of the school, and there had been an unfortunate incident in the playground. And so I said, you know, very upsetting, what just happened. And I'm waiting for a phone call from the hospital. So just saying that, I didn't describe what had happened, didn't ask them what had happened. But, you know, I thought I should call you here together because the hospital said they'd ring in a minute. So the hospital rang and I asked one of the children to answer the phone. And they just said, it's very bad. So they let us know or something, didn't say anything, didn't say they're dead, luckily, because that would have kind of, well, we could have dealt with it maybe, but that would maybe have tightened the screw a bit too much at that point. So, so the next task was to tell the parents and so on. So it took a while before we actually did talk about what might have happened in the playground, but it was their responsibility, not me telling them, oh dear, isn't bullying a very bad thing? So do you see what I'm saying? Distance. Outer space is great. Loads of stuff can happen in outer space. You know, we don't want you on our planet, actually. You know, look what you've done to your own planet. I think distance is the key, and is certainly a key to a great deal of Dorothy's work. If you look at how she manipulates it in the materials you'll be looking at, there'll be a lot of that. So
well, one of the things that I think what Dorothy would say, even though you're co-creating the drama with the group, you are also the teacher is operating very much as a playwright. So
totally.
That's what you're actually creating a play, making a play.
Absolutely, and that's certainly the way I try to operate. And again, if you look at the sorts of rituals, for example, which Dorothy does like. I mean, the end of the blowing up the drama was a ritual created by everybody. And even games, Shakespeare, I don't use a lot of games myself, but sometimes if you have to pause a lesson and pick it up, sometimes you can find a game that will make a link to the emotional quality that you've paused, that you had to leave on hold, as it were. Certainly, dear old tableaus and depictions and so on. The conventions, it's a difficult word that. It's not a word I'm terribly fond of because of the way it has been used elsewhere. But the way she uses it, if you look in more detail at it, it's very useful. I don't know if you know Dorothy Heathcote Essential Writings, which is the follow-up to the first one, which has some useful additions. It has more recent stuff, like Commission and Rolling Roll articles in there, but it also has one or two of the more significant articles from the first collected writings. So it has a kind of follow-up to the conventions, which actually goes into more detail on them, and I think explains how they can be used. Where have we got to?
What you say about distancing, I think, is right. I think she was very good at that, because once I was working, Yona Tyler Evans and I were working on a project. We'd got some funding to do something about drug education in schools, and we came up with an idea. We were thinking that maybe we would set the drama in a youth club. And then we went to Dorothy and she said, no, what I think you should do is create a community store. And we thought, what? Well, where's the connection with drug education? And of course it came to it in the end, but by a roundabout means. Yeah. So it's exactly what Stig's book, I love that phrase, distancing at close range. Yeah. Right? I think that's absolutely right. Did you want to say anything, Stig, about that? Throwing you into it at the moment. And so, okay. Questions, we had lots of questions about process drama, such as what makes it significant, what makes it work in the school curriculum, the best age group, the favorite part of the work, advice on how to facilitate it. But I think open it up now to you, to questions. So you had lots of questions last week. So what would you like to ask now? Somebody start us up.
I'm not sure if it's entirely relevant in terms of like following it on, but one of my questions was what is your favorite pretext that you've made? You might have to rack your brain this one.
I happen to have it about my person.
So the question, I don't know if you picked it up on the microphone, but the question is, what is her favorite pretext that she's made? So the pretext is a starting point for the drama.
Yeah. I don't know if this is my absolute favorite, but it certainly is the world's favorite drama lesson. And if I had £1 for every time it's been done, I'd be in my own yacht on the Mediterranean. So this is a wonderful book. It's full of starting points, but not all of them are pretexts. And when I started to think of, when I began to realize that I was working in a slightly different way from slightly different starting points, I remembered this book, and it's a lovely book for all sorts of reasons.
So it's John Birmingham, Would You Rather?
Would You Rather? And the question is, it's all a question, it's a load of questions. Would you rather be covered in jam, soaked with water, or pulled through the mud by a dog? None of those are pretexts that I can see, but maybe, well, actually, I tell a lie. I'm going to try covered in jam. What went before and what came after? But this one is, would you be rather be made to eat spider stew, slug dumplings, mashed worms, or drink snail squash? Or would you rather jump in the nettles for £5, swallow a dead frog for £20, and spend all night in a creepy house for £50? Now, prices have changed. So how I started that one was, and I think at this point, I'm not sure how much I knew what I was doing, but I was intrigued by it. And so I began, I created a poster that said £100, I guess it would probably now have to be £1,000, £100,000, let's say, to anyone willing to spend a night in Darkwood Manor. have you come across Darkwood Manor in your travels elsewhere? It has been, I would say, it has been adopted in various circles. So I just begin by saying, oh, that's wonderful. You all read the advertisement. I'm delighted to see so many of you here. That's just great. So you're all interested in spending a night in Darkwood Manor. And then the class, would anybody like to ask any questions before we go there? Yes, various questions. But a couple of key questions, mostly about what it looks like. It's very old, it's a bit decrepit, there's no electricity. You can kind of feed in rather unattractive sides of it a little bit. And, and I'm afraid that, it's damp. If anybody has any health problems, that's one of the reasons I won't be coming with you. But my doctors have advised against it. And of course, we will unlock the doors in the morning and tell you you're locked in. Well, I mean, you could just go in and out, in one door and out the other, couldn't you? And then you'd be expecting to be paid. I'm not a fool. I would pay you £1,000 for that. And so they begin to say they would go. And then I say, oh, yes, I'm just passing this round. Will you just fill names and addresses and next to the kin? And that always kind of got them. So I kind of stop it there and say, well, look, don't take my word for it. It's perfectly nice. I mean, I inherited it from they asked me about where I got it from, inherited it from my uncle. He passed away. He died in the house. I say, well, it's 300 years old, or 500 years old, whatever. Lots of people have died there. It's natural that people didn't go to hospital back in those days. And then they have another little thing. And that didn't work in Columbus, Ohio, where when I said it was 300 years old, I mean, Columbus is about 20 years old or something, I'm exaggerating, but it's certainly, the whole city was founded perhaps 100 years ago. And I said, oh, well, it's, there was a settlement of some kind there before. So you have to adjust to your circumstances. Anyway, then the next stage is they go and talk to the villagers, and they get in twos, and they get all sorts of most horrific stories about the house. And by that stage, they're so invested in the whole thing that, of course, they're going to go, or I tell them they go. So those who went, you don't actually have to go. But of course, the trickiest thing is making the haunted house happen. So my advice is don't. Do the befores. The present tense is kind of the agreement to go, if you like, and the afters. And I've done this in various parts of the world. The afters change. Usually psychiatrists are involved, or the dreams, the recurring dreams people have of the house, of the night there, those kinds of dreams. Shakespeare's full of them. I think in Canada, very remote part of Canada, what happened next was that for some reason, well, all of the students were girls. 16 pregnant girls were found wandering in the woods. So then it became kind of science fiction. So these were sort of like children being specially, I don't know what, I can't remember the details, but it certainly took me by surprise. And somebody asked what was the best bit about doing process drama is when you're taken by surprise at the investment into the work of people. But in terms of pretext, I realized that some of the lovely ideas in here aren't really pretext, or at least it would take such a lot of work to turn them into a pretext. So would you rather your house was surrounded by water, snow, or jungle? but there's no sense much of a past. There's a future, but there isn't that sense of something poised on the edge of carrying the weight of everything that's gone before, like the haunted house does, and certainly what's going to happen after. So it's that moment in the present that Dorothy also talked about finding that moment. She was completely obsessed by time, which is the great structural principle of theatre, because it happens now. You know, you can't say, hang on a minute, I'll just go and read the first chapter again, you know, not like literature. Though that is kind of, time operates there as well. But theatre operates precisely in that way. So, of course, with her understanding of theatre, knew that instinctively. And that's, I think, why much of her work is actually located in the past, but it always, as you said, has absolute implications for now. And it was lovely even to see in the garden, the commission model, what could be seen to be more technical than that, and yet totally isn't. And so the memories of water, the trees, the shape of trees, all of those aesthetic qualities are in there. And the best drama happens both in Dorothy's work, and I hope in mine and Brian's and Steve's and everybody's, is when there is an aesthetic element which is sort of at the heart of it, or at least you reach that, whereas there's a sort of conscious shaping of the work, not just by the teacher, but by the contributions of the students, where you almost not quite sit back, but when it develops in a kind of almost organic and structural way. So the difference, I think, between pretext and the kind of trauma you were describing, where you have your checklist of, you know, you do a bit of this, a bit of that, and a bit of the other, seems missed opportunities, but very easy to do, tick the boxes. Yes, they've, you know, done all of the following. But for an understanding, I think, of what's at the heart of theatre and at the heart of drama, you know, look at Dorothy's notions of time and at the strategies she puts in place. But having said that, there are differences between our work, which Gavin noticed. He said that, he describes a lesson where there had been a great disaster in somewhere or other, and the young people were asked to present an artwork of some kind to commemorate the disaster, and which he notes is the sort of thing Dorothy might do. But I can't remember that drama lesson. But apparently, the students are busy working on creating a statue or piece of theatre or whatever, and I come in as the lady from the. Do you remember it? Or
the Arts Council, isn't it?
The Arts Council, exactly, and say wonderful work, but does seem to hint that some mistakes have been made by the government. And of course, we have now proved that that was completely untrue. Our independent inquiry established that no mistakes were made at all when the mine blew up or whatever it was. That, you know, that in fact, it was, you know, a rogue employee who created the disaster. I don't know if this rings at all topically in people's ears. So anyway, and as Gavin said, Dorothy wouldn't have done that. She wouldn't have injected a kind of deliberate, dramatic encounter at that point. She would probably have done some wonderful work on the mine disaster and, you know, looked at, you know, the repercussions and the lives of the people and so on. And it might have been much more worthwhile piece of work than my more dramatic one. But so that is a difference, because I do like the drama. Whereas Dorothy, I think, increasingly held off from those cheap thrills. So I hope they're not all cheap thrills. But in terms of other material, if you're looking for material, look at popular culture, look at films, look at what are the, what's on television, look at the things that people are that kind of getting excited about. Zombies were very popular for a while, robots, but even something like Succession, that wonderful series about a very, very rich family. But if you look at that, it's about a family. Most great plays from Oedipus onwards are about families. You know, Hamlet, Macbeth, doesn't have one, or did he? Would he? So a play that doesn't have some kind of implications for a family relationship, because that's the relationship we all know best, or think we know best. So I would go to B movies particularly, and not necessarily the greatest, but the ones that capture popular imagination.
I was going to say, because where do you get your ideas? Because your pretexts are things that get people into the middle of a situation with a bit of a question and a mystery to it, maybe, engages us very quickly. And also, and yet at the same time, it's very open to what's going to follow from that. So quite a sort of famous example is the Frank Miller example, where you say, Frank Miller's coming back to town. And so why he's been away and what the impact is, or what the significance of him coming back is open for the group to explore. But where do you find these ideas from?
I steal them. Well, if I think of things like an invitation, like to the haunted house is a good example, or a warning, Frank Miller, or a threat, a proclamation. I have announced that, whatever it might be, but a proclamation is going to affect everybody. The government is constantly making them. Really, they don't announce them as proclamations, but because of this dangerous illness, everybody must be isolated in single rooms. We have prepared them for you in that very large building over there. As you come in, you'll be given a number, and that number will lead you to your room. You will stay there until the emergency is over. I've got you now, you can't go. So, a protest, yes, who makes, or a news item. Thousands of pigs were observed approaching Whitehall. The army is on standby. However, the Prime Minister announces that the whole thing is an exaggeration and mustn't be believed. So, but can you imagine thousands of pigs? They can't kill them because then they'll have millions. I mean, how many thousands of pigs are being killed? If it was France, they would dump them in Downing Street, but here, no. So, but King Lear, I announce that I am going to divide my kingdom among my 3 daughters, whichever of them pleases me most. Okay, and which he does, divide them, rather not, as the case may be. I think all of those, so news headline, invitation, threat, warning, something like the reading of a will. I use poetry a lot. I don't always share it with the group, but it starts me thinking. A poem called The Coming of the Plague was the beginning of a Greenhaven drama that, again, was very useful, where, again, a bit like what I just said, an isolated community, a ship arrives, and the populace are told that they have to be isolated. It was a bit prophetic, that one, as a group, because of the outbreak of plague elsewhere, and they thought it was, it had been proved, or they then go about proving that it's in the community. So the community have to stay. It doesn't affect the young people, so they're allowed to leave. The other thing is fairy tales. Little Red Riding Hood is a favorite, but also fairy tales, somebody said, are true. They have persisted down the ages. They're often not very nice. Dorothy was wonderful at getting the students, the children, to read her role. So for some reason, I remember a group of students, of children, maybe 5 or 6, and she asked them just to knock on different doors, as far as I recall. And so they knocked on the door, and she opened. She said, "Oh, children, come on in." No, absolutely not. But then she became somebody who the children responded to. So she was a very good actor. Not everybody is, including me, which is why I mostly play dreary old bureaucrats, because there's always somebody higher. It's never me to blame. If it was up to me, I wouldn't put you all in rooms like that. No, I don't think it's right. Anyway, but it's my job. I have to do it. Sorry about it. So it's no good asking me to let you out, or is it? Maybe you persuade me to let you out. I don't know. I like the idea of sending you all to these rooms. Anybody want to come on back on any of that?
In your ideal process, John, what do you think the most important things are to remember?
That you're in a room with people who may not want to do it with you. So getting the kind of agreement which Dorothy does effortlessly, often imperceptibly she gets it. She will say, maybe, do you want to look at this thing? Or she'll do it through using an intriguing piece of material. But I'm more likely to use teacher and role at the beginning to launch the pretext, and then less and less and less and less as the work goes on, maybe never again through the work. You can get awfully sick of never with Dorothy, because she somehow seemed to do it with the children in a way. But I think I learned from getting it wrong so many times that the sooner I stop being in role, the more effective, and the more it starts to belong to the children. And if it doesn't belong to them, then you can sort of forget about it. That for then, and maybe Saved by the Bell, or find something that will kind of put the activity on hold, that saves your face, but more importantly, that saves the children's face. Because if you were to say, "Oh, that's not working, is it? Let's forget about it," that means we've all failed, and that's no good. I did once say to Dorothy, do you ever feel that a lesson has been a failure? And she looked at me quite crossly and she said, no. She said that would be a very foolish thing to do, because how do I know whether it's been a failure or not? You know, the participants will know something will have come of it for someone. And I'm not the person who's in a position to say that. So she was quite firm about that isn't, you know, to think of work in terms of success, failure is too blunt a way to approach it. On the other hand, we all know when we've done good work, and we've done reasonable work, and we've done work we're really pleased with, and we know that how? By the reactions of the class, I think. So has anybody encountered any particular difficulties in your attempts to teach drama, or your success in teaching drama?
I think the situation for some people here, at least, is that we've not, I mean, I'm finding now, suddenly I'm back in schools after 2 years.
Yeah.
And I know many people here have been spending their kind of years here doing things online, which makes drama very difficult, I think. It has made it pretty impossible.
I tried it once. I had to do one, so it was a fail. Well, we mustn't talk about that. It was not a success, let's say. But the other thing, I realize we're running out of time, but if I were asked what skills does a teacher need to have, I think the skills of negotiation, which Dorothy had to a remarkable extent, and another key skill is to be able to tell a story. Just to be able to tell a story. Not because you may want to tell a story. I think it's a very good thing to tell a story. Sometimes it's a better thing to tell a story than to read a story. I remember I did tell a story once to a group. It was a shared story. And at the end, the kids said, "Oh, will you read us that story again?" Actually, we wrote the story. So if you can tell a story that you believe in, it could be the oldest story in the world, or it could be one that you make with the kids. So, for example, once upon a time, in a deep, dark, can you help me? Deep, dark cave. Once upon a time, in a deep, dark cave, there lived a very, what, sorry?
A troll.
A troll. Now, I have to say that trolls on the whole, maybe our Scandinavian friends can help us here, but I understand that trolls are not the prettiest creatures in the world. Are they? Are they pretty?
Not sure.
Well, problem with this troll was that she was absolutely delightful to look at. And that was the reason that she was in this deep, dark cave. Because, you know what happened? Whenever she went to the troll parties, they had parties, you know, they're usually under bridges. And at these parties, what do they like to drink, trolls?
They like to drink stone liquor.
Stone liquor. And I have to say, it doesn't have a good effect. So, in this deep, dark cave, there lived this very pretty little troll. And her name was, what was her name again?
Stella.
Stella. That's not a good name for a troll, is it? Stella means star. She was deeply, deeply unpopular with the other trolls. And I have to say that whenever she went to the troll parties, she tried the stone liquor. She didn't like it. Nobody would dance with her. Said, "You're not a proper troll. What kind of troll are you? Get back to your deep, dark cave." So Stella, in the deep, dark cave, sat there night after night until one night she saw something shining. I don't know what it was. We're running out of time. But you see what I mean? It's not my story. It's our story. And we can write it down. We can illustrate it. We can do all of those things. So it can go wrong slightly, but on the other hand, if this story goes wrong, we can save it. It may even improve things. So once upon a time, I was working with some five-year-olds, I think. And once upon a time, there was a princess, somebody said. And her name was, and there was a little boy who hadn't been paying much attention. He said, Henry. So a bit like the pretty troll, we had all the troubles of Princess Henry's life for quite a while. It all worked out in the end. I think she married somebody called, I don't know, I can't remember, but it was that kind of thing where that doesn't matter. You can turn it around. So that's my advice to you: learn to tell a good story. And because the thing about that exercise, and in a way it's an exercise, is you have to listen, and you also have to use what you hear. So it seems to me to be a good teacher training exercise for anybody who wants to work with younger children, particularly. Somebody asked who were the hardest, most difficult ages or to work with. I think probably the easiest may be the younger kids, though I haven't always found them that easy, but the hardest, I think, are the sort of 13, 14 years old, because they don't know who they are. There's already and if you ask them to adopt another identity, in a way that can sometimes be a relief, but it's there's so much going on, that it's very hard for them to take their mind off themselves. And I think that's one of the reasons, that's one of the brilliant reasons to do drama, is it gets kids out of their own skins very briefly, and it lets them inhabit other perspectives, and it relieves them of the burden of themselves, and I think for teenagers particularly, it is about, who are you? What are you doing here? What are you about? Do you matter? All of those things can be left on one side. And the other difficult people to work with are very rich, entitled, clever children. Because do you have a problem? Money, that'll cure it. And which is why succession is interesting, because the money doesn't cure the problems. It partly is the problem. So they're tricky to work with because they feel immensely entitled and not prepared to spend a moment of their time on what seems to be something rather silly, or something that, are they going to get an A grade for it? Well, we'll see. Very, very bright A-level students, for example, who want to get A's and everything, are impatient if you seem to be wasting time on anything that isn't the case. So then you have to really be very precise for them about what your teaching objectives are, which would count for them, not necessarily for you. That I'm not saying descend into the transmission model, but make sure that you are doing the toughest thing on their syllabus and finding a way to approach it that will allow you to get inside it. Does that make sense? Anybody who has experienced some of those difficulties or may in future?
I have time, I think, for one more question. So, question from the audience. You had so many questions last week. Well, Harrison, you had a very interesting question. Do you remember what your question was?
How have changing times changed the method that you use?
How have changing times changed the method that you use?
I would say very little, except that I don't do this sort of work as often as I used to, because the changing times, Harrison, mean that, you know, as a drama teacher of the kind I am and Dorothy was, we're not seen as relevant, perhaps, which is disappointing in England. I mean, some other places also. England, not so much. And I think that's a pity, not just for my sake, but for to have the work of an educator like Dorothy, who can activate the curriculum, enliven it, engage children in something worthwhile. Who was it said, education should be about something worthwhile, something worth knowing, not something that you can find the answer to on your phone. You know, it's this fact-driven, box-ticking, arid, deeply depressing curriculum, which is designed for people not to learn very much. You know, I can never forgive Michael Gove for the damage he has done to the curriculum. And I think not a teacher in England will perhaps forgive it, who can recall what schools and teachers used to be able to do when their whole time wasn't taken up with paperwork and ticking this and doing that. And of course, the interesting thing is, oh, everybody's very worried about education. Okay, it doesn't seem to be working. Let's do more of it. It's a perfect example of insanity, to do the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result. So that's a depressing note to end on. However,
it's true though. It's true.
Thank you. I wish it wasn't. I really wish it wasn't. And there was a time when England was known, which is why I was working in the States, why Brian was working in the States, because this was the English, particularly the elementary curriculum, was a beacon for other people to aspire to. And now the American system, God bless it, which is answer the following, tick which you think are the correct answers to the following questions. You know, that's all testing. And as a result, I think, you know, people get the politicians and the education system they deserve, not what the people deserve. And it's interesting that people want to improve skills in this country. What do employers want? They want the ability to work with others. They want cooperation. They want innovation. They want creativity. All of those things which have been removed quite systematically from our education system. However, this weekend is going to change all that. We'll go forward into the future under the banner of Dorothy. And you know, I do hope some of that has made some sense, and it's been very nice to talk to you.
It's been great to listen to you, so thank you very much. That was wonderful, thank you very much. And I hope you will tell us that story again now. You know, the one about the troll?
Oh. I know it, I've got that story. I shall expect the rest of the story from you by tomorrow.
Great. Our next session from 11:15 onwards will be online. We have 3 sessions today live from Newman and other sessions online. So that next session starting 11:15 is chaired by Jan Koch, and it is with 3 speakers, International Connections, Pieces of Dorothy. Thank you everyone from Newman, the drama students here, and thank you again, Cecily. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.